Do you ever sit down to paint and you just feel stuck? You don't know where to start? That can be very paralyzing for an artist. But don't worry. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to start your painting. So whether you've been painting a long time or you're a beginner, this is a great look into how to start your painting and set yourself up for success. In watercolor, we paint from light to dark. In other mediums, you have a lot more flexibility, and you can actually paint the light on top of all of your dark values. But in watercolor, we do things backwards. So this requires that you think through your painting almost in reverse. That makes the first wash of your painting very important. Today I'm going to show you how I paint the first wash in this scene. The first wash is an important foundation that creates the light for the rest of your painting. After I lay in my drawing, and after that is all settled, we've settled the composition, then I wet down the back and the front of my paper. Now I know a lot of people aren't comfortable with doing that. I paint with my paper laying loose on my surface. So if you're not comfortable with that, don't worry about that. Just tape your paper down like you normally do, but take a sponge and pre-wet your paper. And now I'm ready to lay in the lightest values of the scene. Now right away, I can see that the light on this barn, on this white building here, is the brightest part of the painting. So I'm gonna preserve that white of the paper in order to let that be the brightest part of the painting. I know that everywhere else in the scene is gonna be darker than that one area. And just establishing that little bit of information can be helpful and take away some of the question marks as to what to paint first, where do I go. First, identify the brightest part of your painting and work your way from there. After I've identified that, I'm gonna paint my sky first. So the sky lands in the light values. And you'll notice here I'm making the sky darker on top, lighter as it reaches the horizon. And so I'm laying in those light values. So you'll notice I'm getting a hard edge here. I want to explain that real quick. I'm gonna take a small step back. I wet down the entire back of my paper. If there's white that you want to preserve, avoid that part when you wet the front of your paper. So I went around that area with the sponge so I can preserve the white here on the building. That's why you're seeing a hard edge right here and soft edges everywhere else. I should say that the reason I wanted to dampen the front and the back of the paper is to give myself time to work wet into wet. That's a very important part of the first wash of your painting, working wet and wet. Watercolor is unlike any other medium in that way, is that the way that we can paint wet into wet and let colors blend and merge on the paper is very unique to the medium. So I want to take advantage of that. I don't want to have to move too quickly. That's why I like to wet down the back and the front of the paper. In this first wash, I'm laying the light values for the whole scene. Now that's the lightest part of those areas around the entire painting. Part of the reasoning here for doing this, when I go back and paint the final value for this background hill, are there little bits of color that I want to leave behind? Do I want to avoid areas in that second wash? If the answer is yes, I lay down a light color in the first wash. I usually do that anyway because I don't know exactly every bit that I want to leave behind of my first wash. So I like to give myself options, even if I add some vibrant yellow at the bottom of a landscape because there's a few wildflowers there and I want to paint around them. If I don't like them, I can always paint over them, but I want to include it in the first wash to give myself options. Here, I'm working from the wet edge, even though I dampened my paper on the front and the back. Depending on the time of year, the humidity in your studio where you paint, the paper will dry faster or slower. Here it's drying fast. If that happens to you, you still want to take advantage of working wet into wet, simply reload your brush and work from this bead here. That way you can get a smooth, seamless wash all over your paper in the first wash. So I'm adding some color in for the larger tree that is behind the barn, laying in color for the shadow side of the barn. Again, light colors. So a lot of this I'll be painting over, but I want to set myself up for that next wash. Now, you'll see I used pretty dull colors for the background mountains. My strategy there is we want less saturation in the distance. More saturation closer up, that'll enhance the feeling of depth within your paintings. So as I get into this area, we're seeing more vibrant greens of the grasses. I'm laying those in now. and leaving a few little bits of white behind, like on this barn or if there's a road leading up to here. But generally, I cover the whole paper in this process. There's not always going to be a white area that I want to leave. Now I'm getting down to the shoreline, adding some color there for the lightest values of the reflection. This is important. I'm not trying to get a full range of values in my first wash. This is all just the light of the scene. Remember that, because a lot of times we want to skip ahead. We want to get to those dark values really early. Hold off on those. Just think about a soft, light wash for the entire scene. Now I say light wash, but I want you to compare the value of my wash to the white paper. So you don't want to go too light in your first wash. Don't be afraid to paint boldly within your first wash. That's a mistake I often see is students painting too light. So you can paint bold in your first wash. Just know that your middle values will need to be strong too to work with your value structure in your painting. And I'm working wet and wet to create the reflections. And that is a look at the first wash of my painting. This is crucial in setting yourself up for the other phases. Let me go ahead and show you quickly what those phases look like, but this is the first wash right here. I've set up a good foundation. I've established the light around the scene, and I'll show you how that works with the middle values. After I've laid in that first initial wash, then it's time to get into the middle values, and I'm going to skim over this so you can see what I mean about layering. See how there's some tiny bits in the hill that I wanted to leave behind? I painted that color, that value in the first wash. Then I can avoid the areas that I want to preserve. There's a little bit of information here that I'm leaving. There's some light on this tree that I'm leaving. All of that was set up in the first wash of the painting. So that value for the hill there, I needed to get that set up in my first wash. And now I'm painting the shadow side of the barn, connecting it back in to this middle value shape. I scraped in a few lines here for the branches. And then I'm down into the connected shape of the reflection. So you can see how the middle values sit on top of the lighter values. And automatically, we're in a pretty good place. I haven't added in all the darks yet, but right there you can see how these washes work hand in hand with each other. And taking a little bit of time to think through your first wash and setting up the light in your scene at a nice fluid wet and wet wash, you can establish the lights that work with the middle values and the darks. So here's a look at the final painting that I created from this reference photo. And I hope that this look at the first wash of the painting, how we set up that foundation of the scene, is helpful for you. If you're curious about how I paint and want to learn more about my process, take a look at this free resource. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone. You could print it out. You can download this right now before you start your next painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.